She's a gold digger. Ethan, how could you give her that extravagant bag? Margaret Caldwell scoffs, jabbing a finger at the Hermes purse Ethan gifted Aaliyah Brooks for her 26th birthday in their sleek Chicago penthouse. Aaliyah, a radiant black woman, faces the Caldwell's racist disdain their glares, mocking her skin and humble cafe job unbeknownst to them. She's the CEO of a fashion empire and a philanthropist. Concealing her power to expose their true colors, will her secret shatter their arrogance or spark a fiercer clash? Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us where you're watching. Paris, Tokyo, morning, or night. What will Aaliyah do next? Drop your predictions below and stick around. This twist will stun you. The Chicago skyline shimmered beyond the towering windows of Aaliyah Brooks' penthouse. Its constellation of lights, of fleeting comfort against the storm brewing within the air, was rich with the aroma of roasted lamb and rosemary. A feast Aaliyah had crafted for her 26th birthday. Her white silk dress, a flowing creation of her own design, clung softly to her frame, its elegance a quiet rebellion against the evening's weight. Her natural curls gently waved, spilled over her shoulders, catching the chandelier's golden glow. At 26, Aaliyah was a portrait of resilience, her deep brown eyes sharp with unspoken resolve. Orphaned at 10, she'd risen from the ashes of foster homes to lead Brooks' Atelier, a fashion empire, while running the Saffron Brew, a cozy cafe as a humble facade. Her secret philanthropy for black children's education was her soul's work, but she kept it veiled, especially from Ethan's family. She wanted their judgment, raw, unfiltered, to see their hearts laid bare. Ethan Caldwell, her husband of 1 month, was still at his corporate office, steering the Caldwell conglomerate at 30. His chiseled features and green eyes held a warmth that had captured Aaliyah's heart. But his family's wealth cast a cold shadow. The Caldwells, Margaret, Richard, and Claire, saw Aaliyah as a gold digger, a cafe owner unworthy of their legacy. They'd begrudgingly accepted their marriage, but their disdain was a sharpened blade. Tonight, Aaliyah had invited them to their penthouse, a sleek sanctuary of modern art and warm mahogany, hoping for a fragile peace. But as she adjusted a vase of white highs, the doorbell's chime sliced through the air like a warning. Margaret entered first, her silver hair pinned in a severe chignon, her navy dress whispering, "Old money." "Aaliyah, dear," she said, her smile as brittle as the diamonds at her throat. "This is charming." Her eyes swept over the handset. Table porcelain plates, candles, flickering in crystal holders as if it were a second-hand trinket. Richard followed his gray suit pristine offering. A curt nod smells passable. He grunted, his tone laced with surprise. Claire, 24, sauntered in her blonde bob, gleaming her eyes, narrowing at the spread of lamb, roasted vegetables, and artisanal bread. "No caterers?" she asked, her brow arched, bold for a barista. Aaliyah's jaw tightened, but her smile remained serene. "I wanted it to feel personal," she said, her voice smooth as the silk of her dress. "Please, take a seat." Her heels clicked softly on the hardwood as she gestured to the dining area. Margaret settled at the table, her posture rigid. "Aaliyah, fetch me some sparkling water," she commanded, her eyes fixed on the skyline. As if Aaliyah were a servant, Aaliyah's fingers curled, but she nodded. Gliding to the kitchen, Claire's voice trailed after her, a venomous whisper. "She's trying so hard, isn't she? It's almost pathetic." Richard's low chuckle was a dagger, and Aaliyah's chest tightened. She'd endured worse foster homes where her dreams were mocked, boardrooms where her skin drew stares, but this was her home, her night. Returning with the water, Aaliyah caught Margaret's appraising glance at her dress. "That gown is striking," Margaret said, her tone implying excess. "Did Ethan purchase it for you?" The question was a barb, suggesting Aaliyah couldn't afford such finery. "I chose it myself." Aaliyah replied, her voice steady, pride flickering in her eyes. The dress was her creation, but she held that truth close. Claire leaned forward, her smile sucturing. It's just a lot for a home party running a coffee shop. Must leave little time for Ethan's world. The words coffee shop dripped with condescension, and Aaliyah's fork paused midair. I manage, she said, her tone a quiet blade. The meal began, but the Caldwell slights grew sharper. Richard pushed his plate aside, muttering, underseasoned, don't you think? Despite the lamb's flawless crust. Claire accidentally knocked over a glass, then waved Aaliyah to clean it. You're used to messes at the cafe, right? She smirked. Margaret sighed. Inspecting a napkin linen would have elevated this dear details matter in our circles. Each word was a calculated pinprick testing Aaliyah's composure. She moved with grace, clearing the glass, refilling drinks, her smile, a shield. She'd hidden her empire, her charity. To see them unmasked, their cruelty was her evidence. The front door clicked open, and Ethan's voice rang out. Aaliyah, I'm... Home relief flooded her, but the Caldwell's eyes narrowed as if his warmth were an affront. Ethan strode in his suit, slightly rumpled, carrying a bouquet of roses and a woven basket brimming with gifts. His green eyes lit up at Aaliyah. Happy birthday, love, he said, kissing her softly. He set the basket down, revealing a diamond necklace that sparkled like starlight and a sleek Hermes bag. Aaliyah's breath caught, not for the gifts, but for his love. Margaret's lips pursed. She's a gold digger, Ethan. How could you give her that extravagant bag? She scoffed, her voice slicing through the room. Ethan's jaw tightened, but Aaliyah squeezed his hand, a silent plea to hold back. The night was young, and she was ready to fight her own battle. The Chicago penthouse pulsed with, on the distant hum of the city, its neon glow, a faint rebellion against the venom seeping through the dining room. Aaliyah Brooks stood by the mahogany table, her white silk dress catching the flicker of silver candelabras, its pristine folds a silent testament to her restraint. The sting of Margaret Caldwell's words, she's a gold digger. Ethan still hung in the air, sharp as the rosemary scent from the untouched lamb. Aaliyah's deep brown eyes scanned the room, her composure a steel core beneath the weight of their disdain. Ethan sat beside her, his green eyes blazing with suppressed fury, his hand gripping hers under the table. The Hermes bag and diamond necklace he'd gifted her gleamed on a sideboard, mocked by his family's sneers. Margaret, perched at the table's head, swirled her wineglass, her silver hair glinting like a blade. Aaliyah, she began, her voice smooth, but laced with frost. Running a cafe must be so quaint. Do you ever find it limiting? Surrounded by all this, her gesture swept the penthouse, its modern art, its polished floors, as if Aaliyah's world could never belong. Aaliyah's jaw tightened, but her smile held. I find it grounding, she replied, her tone. Even serving people teaches you their hearts. Her words were a quiet jab, but Margaret's lips curled, unmoved. Claire, across the table, toyed with her blonde bob, her eyes glinting with malice, serving coffee. You mean, she said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. Must be hard keeping up with Ethan's lifestyle, all those late nights pouring lattes. Her giggle was a needle, and Richard beside her snorted, his gray suit creasing as he leaned back. Can't imagine it pays for dresses like that, he muttered, eyeing Aaliyah's gown. The implication was clear. Her elegance was a fraud, bought by Ethan's wealth. Aaliyah's fingers curled around her fork, but she breathed slowly, her resolve a river carving through stone she'd faced worse than their barbs. Foster homes where her worth was questioned. Corporate rooms where her skin was a barrier. That was just another trial. Ethan's grip on her hand tightened, his jaw clenching. Enough, he said, his voice low. but trembling with heat. Aaliyah is here as my wife, not your punching bag. Margaret raised a brow, her smile thin. We're just curious, darling, she said, her tone patronizing. We want to know the woman you've chosen. The word chosen carried a weight as if Aaliyah were a mistake to be corrected. Aaliyah squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent plea. To let her fight, she wasn't ready to unveil her truth, her fashion empire, her philanthropy. Not yet. She needed their prejudice exposed raw and undeniable. The servers moved silently, refilling glasses, but the tension was a living thing. Coiling tighter with each bite, Claire reached for her wine. Her movements deliberate her. Eyes locked on Aaliyah. Oops, she gasped, her glass tilting a cascade of red wine, splashing across the table and onto Aaliyah's white dress. The silk bloomed with crimson, a wound against its purity. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, her apology, theatrical. Oh, Aaliyah, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy. Her smirk betrayed her, and Margaret's chuckle was a soft, blade accidents happen. Margaret said, her eyes gleaming. Though white is such a risky choice for someone so busy at a cafe, Aaliyah's heart thudded disdain, a violation of her creation. Her armor, she rose, her movements graceful despite the chaos within, and dabbed at the dress with a napkin. It's fine, she said, her voice steady, though her eyes burned with quiet fire. She designed this gown, poured her soul into its lines, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of her pain. Richard leaned forward, his tone deceptively kind. You should change, dear. That stain's only getting worse. Wouldn't want to ruin Ethan's gift. The word gift was a jab, implying the dress like the bag was beyond her means. Ethan stood his chair, scraping against the floor. Claire, that was no accident, he snapped, his voice. A thunderclap. Claire's smirk faltered, but she shrugged, feigning innocence. Relax, Ethan. It's just wine. Aaliyah touched his arm, her gaze steady. I'll handle it, she said softly, her voice a command wrapped in calm. She glided to the kitchen, the weight of their eyes heavy on her back. In the dim light, she pressed a damp cloth to the stain, her fingers trembling not with anger but with purpose. The wine might mar her dress, but it couldn't touch her strength returning. Aaliyah sat taller, her stained dress now a badge of defiance. Margaret's questions grew bolder, cloaked in politeness, but cutting deep. Do you plan to keep working at that little shop, Aaliyah? It must be hard, balancing Ethan's expectations. The word expectations was a trap, implying Aaliyah could never meet their standards. I balance what matters, Aaliyah replied, her voice clear, her eyes locking onto Margaret's love, purpose, truth. Her words hung in the air, a challenge they couldn't ignore. The candelabras burned, lowered their light, casting jagged shadows across the table. Ethan's hand found hers. Again, his silence, a storm gathering strength. Aaliyah felt the city's pulse beyond the windows, a reminder of her power, her truth. The Caldwells thought they could break her with their words, their wine, their scorn, but she was Aaliyah Brooks, forged in fire, and their insults were only fuel. The night was far from over, and she was ready for the reckoning. Margaret leaned forward, her silver hair glinting like a blade. Aaliyah, she said, her voice a velvet glove over steel. You must understand. Our concern, Ethan's future, demands a certain caliber. A cafe, charming as it is, hardly aligns with our legacy. The word legacy was a guillotine slicing at Aaliyah's worth. Claire, emboldened, twirled her wine glass, her blonde bob catching the light. Yeah, like, no offense, but pouring coffee isn't exactly high society, she said, her giggle. A shard of glass Richard cleared, his throat, his tone patronizing. It's about fit. Aaliyah, our world has expectations you might find challenging. Each word was a calculated strike, implying her blackness, her supposed loneliness disqualified her. Ethan's chair scraped back the sound of thunderclap in the suffocating silence. "Stop it," he growled, his voice raw with fury, his fists clenched. "You don't know her. You don't know anything." Margaret's brow arched her smile. "Thin, Ethan darling, we're only protecting you," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. Aaliyah touched his arm, her gaze steady, urging him to wait. She'd planned to hold her secret, her empire, her philanthropy, until their prejudice was undeniable, but their cruelty had crossed the line. And Ethan's restraint was crumbling. Claire, undeterred, pulled out her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen. "Let's be real, Ethan," she said, smirking. "You can't just marry someone who—" "Oh wait," her voice faltered, her eyes widening as she stared at her phone. "What is this?" She turned the screen toward the table, revealing a headline. "Aaliyah Brooks honored for 2 mayor's donation to Black youth education fund." A photo of Aaliyah, radiant at a gala, filled the screen. The room froze, the candelabras flicker. The only movement, Margaret's wineglass trembled in her hand. Richard's jaw tightened and Claire's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. Ethan seized the moment, his voice rising like a tide. "You think Aaliyah is just a cafe owner," he said, his eyes blazing. "She's the CEO of Brooks Atelier, a multi-million-dollar fashion empire. She's built schools, funded scholarships, changed lives. All while you sneered at her. That dress she's wearing, she designed it. If you've been insulting a woman who's done more than you'll ever understand." His words were a blade cutting through their arrogance with surgical precision. Aaliyah's heart thudded, a mix of pride and trepidation. The truth was out, but the battle was far from won. Aaliyah rose, her stained dress catching the light, its crimson mark now a symbol of her resilience. "I hid who I am because I wanted to see you clearly," she said, her voice low but resonant, commanding the room. "I grew up with nothing, orphaned, alone. But I built everything I have, not for your approval, but for myself, for the kids who need hope. You judge me by my skin, my job, thinking it defined me. That's your failure, not mine." Her eyes swept the table, locking onto Margaret's faltering gaze. Richard's stunned silence. Claire's flushed cheeks. "I love Ethan, and we're building a life together. If you can't respect that, you're the ones who don't fit." Margaret's face palled her. "Composure. Cracking this. This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice hollow. "We didn't know." Richard shifted his eyes, darting to the article on Claire's phone, his silence heavier than words. Claire clutched her phone, her bravado extinguished, a flicker of shame crossing her face. Ethan stood beside Aaliyah, his hand finding hers, his resolve. A quiet vow. The Chicago skyline pulsed beyond the windows, its lights a mirror to Aaliyah's inner fire. She designed the dress, built the empire, funded the dreams of others, all while carrying the weight of their scorn. Now they saw her, truly saw her. But the air remained charged, the candelabras glow dimming. As the night grew heavy, Margaret's eyes narrowed, her shock hardening into defiance. Richard's silence was a question. Claire's a confession. Aaliyah's truth had shattered their facade, but it had also drawn a line. She felt Ethan's hand, warm and steady, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Caldwell's prejudice ran deep, and their next move would define the war. Aaliyah lifted her chin, her stained dress, a banner of her strength. She was ready for whatever came next. Her empire, not just in fashion, but in her unbreakable spirit. The Chicago penthouse felt like a glass cage, its sleek surfaces reflecting the splintered tension that clung to the air. Candelabras had burned to stubs, their faint glow no match for the storm raging. In the dining room, Aaliyah Brooks stood tall, her white silk dress stained but defiant, a silent testament to her unyielding spirit. Her deep brown eyes held steady, scanning the Caldwell's faces, Margaret's rigid defiance, Richard's furrowed brow, Claire's flushed unease. Ethan's hand gripped hers, green eyes clouded with a mix of pride and dread. The city's neon pulse throbbed. Beyond the windows, a distant heartbeat echoing Aaliyah's resolve. She'd bared her truth, her empire, her worth. But the Caldwell silence was a coiled snake, ready to strike. Margaret straightened her silver hair, catching the dim light like a crown of ice. "This changes nothing," she declared, her voice sharp as a shard of glass. "A title, a donation, it's all a performance. You're still not one of us." Her words were a whip lashing at Aaliyah's blackness, her roots, as if her achievements were a costume to be stripped away. Claire, clutching her phone, nodded vigorously, her blonde bob swaying exactly. She said, her voice shrill, "You hit it. Aaliyah, that's sneaky. What else are you hiding?" Her accusation was a desperate grasp at control. Her earlier Jane buried under bravado. Richard shifted in his seat, his gray suit casing as he leaned forward. "Let's not rush to judgment," he said, his tone measured but heavy. "This information is new. It's impressive, Aaliyah, but it raises questions." His eyes met hers, not with warmth, but with calculation, as if weighing her worth against his family's legacy. The fracture was palpable. Margaret and Claire's outright rejection clashing with Richard's cautious reevaluation. Aaliyah's chest tightened, not from their words, but from the weight of their refusal to see her. She'd built an empire from nothing, funded dreams for children. Like the girl she'd been, yet they clung to their prejudice like a lifeline. Ethan's voice cut through the tension, raw and unyielding. "You're unbelievable," he said, his gaze locked on his mother. "Aaliyah's done more than your galas and boardrooms ever will, and you can't even acknowledge it." Margaret's lips pursed, her eyes narrowing. "Don't lecture me, Ethan," she snapped. "You're blinded by her charm. Our family's name carries centuries of responsibility. She'll never understand that her words were a gauntlet, challenging Ethan's loyalty, tugging at the threads of his heritage." Aaliyah squeezed Ethan's hand, her touch a quiet anchor. "I don't need to understand your name," she said, her voice low but resonant, each word a stone in a fortress. "I've built my own. Your legacy doesn't define Ethan's future or mine." Her eyes locked onto Margaret's, unflinching, daring her to strike again. But beneath her calm, a question noted: would Ethan withstand the pull of his family's expectations? She loved his fire, his heart, but love was fragile when tested by blood. Claire, emboldened by her mother's defiance, leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "You're good at speeches, Aaliyah, but let's be real. You're still the girl from nowhere, playing dress up. In our world," her words were a blade aimed at Aaliyah's orphaned past, her blackness, her audacity to rise. Richard raised a hand, his voice gruff. "That's enough, Claire," he said, his tone sharp but conflicted. His eyes flicked to Aaliyah, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his stoic facade. "You've clearly worked hard, but integrating into this family, it's complex." The word complex was a hedge, neither acceptance nor rejection, and it deepened the chasm between them. Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the floor, his face a mask of resolve. "There's nothing complex about it," he said, his voice trembling with conviction. "Aaliyah is my wife. If you can't respect her, you're pushing me out of this family." His words were a thunderbolt reverberating through the room. Margaret's face pallid, her composure cracking while Claire's mouth opened, then closed, her bravado faltering. Richard's jaw tightened, his silence. A storm brewing within Aaliyah's heart raced, a tangle of gratitude and fear. Ethan's stand was a lifeline, but it came at a cost: his family, his legacy, the world. He'd always known the Chicago skyline flickered beyond the glass, its lights a constellation of possibility, but the penthouse felt smaller, its walls closing. In Aaliyah rose her stained dress, catching the last of the candlelight. Its crimson mark, a symbol of battles fought, and yet to come. I didn't come here to beg for your acceptance. She set her voice steady, cutting through the silence. I came for Ethan, for us. If you choose to stay blind, that's your loss. Her words were a line in the sand, delivered with a calm that belied the fire within. Margaret's eyes flashed her, defiance unbroken. But Richard's gaze lingered on Aaliyah, a question forming in its depths. Claire shrank back, her fingers twisting in her lap, caught between loyalty to her mother and the weight of her own shame. Ethan's hand. I found Aaliyah's his touch of vow, but the air was heavy with the cost of his choice. The city's pulse, the atriar outside, a reminder of the world Aaliyah had conquered. She'd faced worse than the Caldwell scorn, but this fight was personal and the stakes were higher. As Margaret's gaze met hers, cold and unyielding, Aaliyah knew the war was far from over. The next move would test them all, her strength, Ethan's resolve, and the fragile bonds of family. The Chicago night hummed with a restless energy. Skyline, a jagged silhouette against the starless sky. Aaliyah Brooks stood on a stage at the city's grandest ballroom, her tailored black gown a stark contrast to the stained white dress of her birthday. Her deep brown eyes gleamed under the chandeliers, her natural curls framing a face both fierce and serene. The Brooks Atelier Gala, a fundraiser for Black youth scholarships, buzzed with Chicago's elite, their applause still echoing from Aaliyah's speech, resilience. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, his green eyes fixed on her pride, wearing with the weight of his family's fracture. The city's pulse throbbed through the glass walls, a reminder of Aaliyah's empire built from the ashes of her orphaned past. Tonight, she was a beacon, but the shadows of the Caldwells loomed. Claire lingered at a high-top table, her blonde bob catching the light, her fingers twisting a champagne flute. Her presence was a surprise, her usual bravado replaced by nervous fidgeting. Richard had come to, his gray suit stiff, his gaze darting between Aaliyah and the crowd. Margaret had stayed away, her absence a silent defiance, but Claire's and Richard's attendance felt like a crack in their armor. Aaliyah had invited them, not for reconciliation, but to witness her world, her power, her purpose. She'd faced their scorn, their wine-soaked insults, and emerged stronger. Now she wanted them to see what she'd built, not for their approval, but for her own truth. A woman approached the stage, her locks swept into an elegant updo, her warm brown skin glowing under the lights. Aaliyah's breath caught Nia Carter, her friend from the foster home, the one who'd shared stolen library books and whispered dreams under threadbare blankets. Nia's smile was a lifeline, pulling Aaliyah back to those cold nights when hope was a fragile spark. Ladies and gentlemen, Nia began, her voice steady. I'm here to honor Aaliyah Brooks, not just for her empire, but for her heart. The crowd hushed, and Aaliyah's heart thudded. A mix of gratitude and vulnerability. Nia's words. W.A. A tapestry of their past. At 10, Aaliyah lost her parents, her home. She said, her eyes locking onto Aaliyah's in foster care. She was told she'd amount to nothing. But she studied by flashlight, worked odd jobs, and never let the world dim her light. She built Brooks Atelier from a single sketch, funded schools for kids like us, kids the world forgets. Nia's voice trembled, then steadied. I'm a doctor today because Aaliyah paid for my education. She's not just a CEO. She's a miracle, the crowd erupted, but Aaliyah's eyes stung, the weight of her past crashing against her present. She'd buried those years, but Nia's words laid them bare, raw and real. Claire's flute slipped, clinking against the table, her face pale, her eyes once sharp with malice, now flickered with something softer. Doubt, perhaps. Shame. Richard's mind jaw tightened. his gaze fixed on Nia then Aaliyah, as if seeing her for the first time. Ethan moved closer to the stage. His suit creased his expression, a tangle of awe and resolve. Aaliyah stepped forward, her voice clear despite the ache in her chest. Nia's story is mine, but it's also every child we fight for. She said her words, a bridge between past and purpose. I didn't rise to prove anyone wrong. I rose to prove myself right. Her gaze swept the room, lingering on Claire and Richard. A quiet challenge. Claire approached later, her steps hesitant. Her Aaliyah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know about your life. I was awful. Her eyes dropped, her fingers twisting. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Aaliyah studied her, the memory of spilled wine and cruel giggles. Sharp, but fading. Trying means listening. Claire, she said, her tone firm but not unkind. It means seeing people, not stereotypes. Start there. Claire nodded. Her face flushed, a fragile bridge forming where venom once stood. Richard lingered by the exit, his posture stiff. Your work, it's substantial. He said, his words clumsy, but earnest. I misjudged you. It wasn't an apology, but it was a step. And Aaliyah met it with a nod, her heart guarded. But open. Ethan joined her, his hand brushing hers, his voice low. I'm calling my mother tomorrow, he said, his eyes resolute. No more games. It's you and me, or it's nothing. His words were a vow, but Aaliyah felt the cost. Family. He might lose the legacy he'd defy. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the ballroom, its lights, a constellation of dreams Aaliyah had woven from pain. Nia's embrace lingered, of reminder of the girl. She'd been the woman. She'd become Claire's wavering, Richard's concession. They were sparks, not fires, but they were enough. For now, Ethan's resolve was a foundation, but the specter of Margaret's defiance loomed a storm. Yet to break, Aaliyah stood taller, her gown a mantle of strength. She'd faced her past, her pain, and found power and forgiveness. Not for the Caldwells, but for herself. The gala's glow faded, but her light burned brighter. Ready for the battles ahead, the Chicago dawn painted the city in hues of steel and gold, its skyline a silent witness to the battle unfolding in the Caldwell families. Opulent lakefront estate, Aaliyah Brooks stood in the grand living room, her tailored navy blazer and jeans. The chandeliers blazed overhead, their light cascading across velvet sofas and polished marble. But Aaliyah's quiet strength was the truest brilliance in the room. Her deep brown eyes burned with resolve, her natural curls catching the morning light that poured through the towering windows. She stood like a pillar against the weight of judgment. In her presence, a grounded contrast to the Caldwell family's grandeur, Ethan stood beside her, his green eyes fierce, his suit sharp and impeccable, though his posture was taut as a bowstring ready to snap. The city's pulse thrummed beyond the glass, its rhythm steady, a heartbeat Aaliyah clung to as she braced for the confrontation. She had faced the Caldwell family's scorn before, endured the bearing of her past, and emerged unbroken. Now, Ethan's vow to draw a line would test the fragile bonds of family, love, and legacy. Margaret sat enthroned in a high-backed chair, silver hair pinned in severe precision, her pale blue dress a mask of understated power. Her eyes, cold as the lake outside, fixed on Aaliyah with unyielding disdain. Richard stood by the fireplace, his gray suit rumpled, his expression caught between reluctance and curiosity. Claire lingered near the window, her blonde bob framing a face torn between doubt and defiance, fingers twisting a delicate bracelet. The air was heavy, choked with unspoken ultimatums, the memory of Aaliyah's gala triumph hanging like a ghost. But this meeting was not about pleading. Aaliyah had invited them here to stand firm, her love for Ethan, a fire no prejudice could extinguish. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but edged with steel. This ends today. His gaze swept the room, lingering on his mother. Aaliyah is my wife, my partner, my future. If you can't respect her brilliance, her heart, then you are choosing to lose me. His words sliced through the suffocating silence like a blade. Margaret's lips tightened, her fingers curling against the armrest. Ethan, she said, her voice smooth but dripping with venom, you are throwing away centuries of legacy for a woman who doesn't belong. You'll regret this. Her words struck like a gauntlet, daring him to sever ties that bound him to her. Aaliyah's heart pounded not from Margaret's barb, but from the weight of Ethan's choice. She squeezed his hand, her touch a quiet anchor, then lifted her gaze to Margaret's icy stare. I don't need your legacy to build a life with Ethan, Aaliyah said, her voice ringing clear, every syllable a stone in a fortress. I created my own, out of nothing, against odds. You will never understand. Your rejection doesn't diminish me, it diminishes you. Her words became a mirror, reflecting Margaret's prejudice back at her. For the first time, a crack spread across the older woman's composure. Richard cleared his throat, his voice rough, but softer than before. Ethan, Aaliyah, I've been wrong. His gaze shifted toward Aaliyah, carrying a flicker of respect. Your work, your story. It's opened my eyes. I want to understand more. His admission was clumsy, a step rather than a leap, but its weight was undeniable. A fracture was forming between him and Margaret. Claire's voice wavered, her fingers tightening around her bracelet. I'm trying, Aaliyah, she said, her eyes glistening. I was cruel, blind. I don't want to be that person anymore. Her words trembled like a fragile bridge under the weight of her past malice. But Aaliyah saw sincerity in her eyes, a spark of change waiting to grow. Margaret's laugh cut through the moment, sharp as broken glass. Sentimental nonsense, she snapped. Her eyes flashed with desperation. You're all fools. Seduced by her act, she's nothing but an opportunist. Her words landed hollow, drowned by the shifting tide. Ethan's face hardened, his voice rising like a storm. No, mother, you're the one clinging to an illusion. Your world, your rules. They're nothing without love, without truth. Aaliyah is my truth. If you can't see that, I'm done. Dinners, holidays, all of it. His ultimatum cracked like thunder, reverberating through the room. The Chicago skyline glimmered beyond the glass, its towers piercing the dawn like monuments to dreams forged through struggle. Aaliyah felt its rhythm pulse through her, a reminder of the empire she had built and the lives she had touched. Ethan's stand was a cornerstone, his love, a sanctuary. But Margaret's defiance loomed like a wall, not yet fallen. Aaliyah lifted her chin, her voice low but searing. You don't scare me, Margaret. I faced worse than your words and won. Ethan and I are building something real, and no amount of your scorn can break it. Her vow was not only for Ethan, it was for herself. Her strength burned like a flame no storm could extinguish. Margaret's gaze faltered, silence escaping her as if it were a concession she had never intended to give. Richard's nod was tentative. Claire's tears, a quiet confession. Ethan's hand tightened around Aaliyah's, his choice blazing like a beacon through the chaos. Outside, the lake shimmered, its waves mirroring the battles yet to come. Aaliyah stood taller, her blazer a mantle of resilience. She had fought for her place, for her love, and now Ethan had chosen her. But Margaret's shadow remained, a final test lingering in the distance. The city's dawn promised new beginnings, but the war was far from over. Aaliyah was ready, her heart steady, her spirit unbreakable, for the confrontation that would define not just her love, but her future. The Chicago morning unfolded into a tapestry of mist and steel, the skyline cutting through the haze like a promise carved in stone. Inside the Caldwell estate study, the air was thick with old money and older grudges. Leather-bound books lined the walls, mahogany panels gleamed, and gilded frames cast silent judgment. Yet Aaliyah Brooks stood tall in her tailored blazer and jeans, her attire itself a quiet defiance against the suffocating weight of tradition. Her deep brown eyes locked onto Margaret's, unflinching. A single lamp illuminated her curls, the lights catching them like a halo forged in fire. Ethan remained at her side, his green eyes unwavering, his hand brushing hers in silent solidarity. Beyond the window, the Chicago River shimmered, its currents a mirror of Aaliyah's resolve. She had faced Margaret's scorn, exposed her truth, and still stood unbroken. Now this final confrontation would forge the path ahead. Margaret sat behind a polished desk, her silver hair a severe crown, her pale eyes sharp as frost. Her voice cut through the air, honed by decades of control. You've caused enough disruption. You may have fooled Ethan, Richard, even Claire, but I see you, a climber, using my son to claw your way up. Axe label struck like venom, a weapon sharpened against Aaliyah's blackness, her ambition, her love. But Aaliyah's face was calm, her strength running deep like a river, unshaken by storms. She had built an empire from nothing, funded dreams for children, loved Ethan fiercely and openly. Margaret's words fell like dust against her armor. I don't need your approval, Margaret, Aaliyah said, her voice low but resonant, cutting through the study's oppressive air. I never did. I fought for everything: my name, my work, my love. Your rejection is your choice, but it doesn't touch me. Her words shone like a beacon, illuminating the truth she had carried all along. Her worth was her own, forged in fire, unyielding to prejudice. Margaret's lips pursed, her fingers tightening around a pen. Her composure cracked like thin ice. You're bold, she hissed, but boldness won't make you family. The word family struck like a wall, meant to exclude. To Danny, but Aaliyah straightened, taller, stronger, unshaken. Ethan stepped forward, his voice quiet but thunderous. She is my family, he said, his gaze piercing his mother's. Keep your legacy, keep your rules. I choose Aaliyah. Every day, every fight. His vow rang through the room, final and unbreakable. Margaret's face bled to her silence, an admission she could not retract. Aaliyah squeezed Ethan's hand, pride swelling in her chest, not because she needed his defense, but because his love stood beside hers as a partner, not a shield. The door opened. Richard entered, his gray suit worn, his face weary, but softened. He looked at Aaliyah with something new in his eyes. Respect. I've been reading about your foundation, he said, voice steady. I'd like to contribute, learn more. It was tentative, but it was a bridge. Aaliyah's guard lowered just enough. Let's talk, she said, her tone firm but open. Claire followed, her blonde bob framing tear-stained eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice raw. I'll be at your next event. I want to help. Her sincerity was fragile, like a bloom trembling in the wind. But Aaliyah saw its roots. Change was possible. Show up. Claire, she said, a small smile flickering. That's a start. The study shifted, the weight of Margaret's defiance buckling under the tide rising against her. She rose stiffly, her posture rigid, her voice brittle. You'll all regret this, she snapped, but the words landed hollow, a storm already spent. Aaliyah met her chance, voice unwavering. The only regret is yours, Margaret, for choosing blindness over truth. It was the final stroke, severing the need for Margaret's validation. Aaliyah turned, Ethan at her side, and left the study. The estate's grandeur faded behind them, dissolving, like a shadow swallowed by light. The Chicago River sparkled under the midday sun, its surface alive with motion, a canvas of resilience and rebirth. Aaliyah and Ethan stood at its banks, the city's pulse thrumming in rhythm with their own. The breeze caught her blazer, her curls dancing in the sunlight. Her eyes traced the river's flow. Steady, unyielding. We're enough, she said softly, her hand warm in Ethan's. You, me, the life we're building. Ethan pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. Always, he murmured, his vow etched in the heartbeat of the city. I'll keep showing up every day. For us, his love was not a crutch, but a foundation, a partner in her fire. Aaliyah felt its strength, like bedrock beneath her feet. Richard's offer, Claire's promise. They were steps forward, not victories. But for now, they were enough. Margaret's resistance lingered as a distant echo, but it could no longer dim Aaliyah's light. She had faced worse loss, doubt, the crushing weight of the world, and emerged each time a warrior, a dreamer, a lover. The river flowed steady, mirroring her journey. She had fought for her place not only in Ethan's heart, but in a world that once tried to shrink her. Now she stood whole, her empire, not just stitched in fashion, but carved in spirit. The skyline soared, its towers, a testament to dreams made real. Aaliyah leaned into Ethan, her heart full, her strength infinite. Prejudice was stubborn, a weed that would not vanish overnight. The battles were not finished, but she was ready. Her light, a star, no darkness could swallow. And as the river sang, she knew this was her triumph, her love, her Chicago. No one could take it away.